Record on this computer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's presentation. This is actually going to be called Let's Talk Braille. For those who are joining after the recording, this is your host, Sean Williams. Thanks for joining. So this is going to be an interview to kind of kick off the Braille playlist, I guess you could say, because this really describes the importance of Braille and why is Braille important, in today's world of technology where everything is, everything seems to talk, and what really is the use of Braille in these times. So I'm going to interview what we longtime Braille users, or at least some of us, call a confirmed Braillester, and that would be me as well, and I know HK as well. We've known Braille since the age of about 5 or 6. So without further ado, I'm going to start the interview. And
VLC, episode 98.
Here we go. Oops.
Play.
Please join me in welcoming Jonathan Mosen. Jonathan, it's great to have you back, man. We've missed you. It's been a few podcasts.
Well, there you go. Nice to talk to you again, Sean.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. For the newbies, I was wondering if you could give us a bit of an intro about yourself.
Well, let's see. I am the director of Mosen Consulting, which produces a range of technology books and webinars and audio books, and we do training as well. I also look after Mushroom FM, which is an internet radio station that actually has just started a daily technology magazine show called The Daily Fiber, where every day at 3 a.m. and p.m. Eastern Time, we go through the latest tech news and explain what it all means. So some of your audience might be interested in that new show on Mushroom FM. And of course, also I direct blindness communications for Freedom Scientific. So there's a lot going on.
Oh yeah, there definitely is, including a nice, wonderful podcast, The Blind Side.
Oh yes, yeah, that's another thing Mosen Consulting does as well. So the blind side's a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, and I believe the technology show you're referring to is the Smorgasbord.
It's called the Daily Fiber, and it just started on the 22nd of January, so it's very new. And so that's replaced the Smorgasbord. So the Smorgasbord was more of a music show with a little bit of tech thrown in. The Daily Fiber has a much greater technology emphasis, and since we launched it on the 22nd of January, it's been really amazingly popular. We have lots and lots of people tuning in and getting into the groove, so it's fun.
Yeah, that is always wonderful to hear when you have someone, or when you launch something and you find that you get a lot of receptive feedback because of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Second. All right, there we go. All right, so to start off with, of course, our main focus is Braille, but you are a totally blind person yourself, correct?
That's right. Yep.
Right. So you went to, if I remember correctly, you went to a school for the blind.
I did to begin with, that's right, when I was, until I was about 11. And then I went into a mainstream school that had good visual resource capabilities as well. So it was pretty well resourced. And then obviously on to university after that.
Right. I mean, so when did you start learning Braille?
I think I must have been about 5, I believe. I think that we learned Braille at the School for the Blind very early, and we would first be shown Braille on the Perkins, but we weren't allowed our own Perkins. I think we had to get to a certain standard of Braille, and it was like this kind of badge of honor that when you got proficient enough with your Braille, they gave you a Perkins. And I remember that being a big moment when you got your own Perkins in the classroom.
So they really stress the point of Braille very much so before you were even allowed a Perkins Brailler.
Oh,
That's
sure, because
yeah.
without Braille, I mean, I wouldn't be able to read and write. And so to me, it's that fundamental. If sighted kids are going to be taught print, then if you're unable to function effectively with print, then as a blind child, you should be learning Braille. So I was very lucky in that regard. Although the classes were quite small, I think we had between 7 and 9 students in one class. But even then, when everybody was brailing an essay or working on a spelling test or whatever, the thunderous clunking of 9 Perkins Braillers was pretty loud.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm just remembering and actually still have a Perkins Brailer, but yeah, they can be quite loud,
Yeah, sure.
especially when you have a couple of them. Yeah, so you sound a lot like what my classroom was at the beginning. It was about I would say about 8 to 9 people as well. Different levels of grades, different grading levels, but ultimately, I think there were about maybe 2 to 3 Perkin Brailers, and it was even loud with just 2 or 3. So I can't imagine 9.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So was learning Braille ever frustrating? For example, I can remember as an early Braille reader slash writer myself being very frustrated. I didn't have the most patient teacher in the world.
Yeah, I remember that the Braille teacher I first had some concern about my Braille reading technique. It doesn't seem to have done me much harm, though. Um, I, they said my fingers weren't flat enough, and I remember getting confused. I think between with and some of those contractions I got confused with. But I think that's the same with most things that you pick up. Every so often when you're learning something, you stumble across a roadblock, but you eventually overcome it. So, I mean, it's hard for me to know whether Braille was any more frustrating for me than print would have been. But I loved to read, and I think what was also helpful is that I have an older brother who's also a Braille reader, and he used to read me a lot of stories when I was very little, and that was an inspiration to me because I wanted to be able to read like that as well.
Wow. Yeah, I cannot say the same thing about myself, but well, actually, yes, I can. It's not necessarily Braille, but anything that my older brother or my younger brother was doing, I always wanted to do the same thing. Maybe I couldn't do the same thing, yeah, as well as they could, but I can remember wanting to do the exact same thing, whatever it was. I didn't want to be left out. I can
Yeah, you
definitely
get that a lot
remember
with
that.
when you've got siblings. I think you want to do the things that they're doing.
Right. Yeah, 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 definitely. Yeah, getting braille contractions confused. I had a horrible time in math. You see, it was getting my E's and I's, or my nines and fives, rather. I would get those mixed up all the time, and
Yeah, it's
it
interesting
was
you say
quite
that.
a. Why
I wonder
did you have that problem?
Well, no, but one of the things I've noticed when I read Americans, especially writing on email lists and forums, only blind ones though, is that quite often the people will write since when they mean sense. So they write that they might be no the other way around. So they might be saying since I lived here I've had these issues, but they write sense sense instead of since, and I only see it with American contributors, and I wasn't sure whether that might be because of a pronunciation thing where they think since and sense sound like the same thing, or whether it's something to do with contractions or what it is. But it's always puzzled me about why that happens.
Yeah, I'm not. I am not sure of that either, because all one has to do really is just sound it out.
Yeah, well, yeah. So that's curious, but yes, I mean I can understand why you might get confused with reversing those contractions.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. So so as I've stated at the school for the blind, they definitely encourage strongly the use of Braille.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean we were passionate about our Braille. There was a really good Braille library there, and we were all encouraged to go and borrow books, and we would also practice reading out loud to the class. And there was a very strong Braille culture. And actually, when I think about it now, a lot of the kids I grew up with are very good Braille readers.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think for me it was I used to go up to a table. It was called the teaching table, and I would go up curiously enough with one other person, one to two people, and I would just sit there and I would read. We had this book, and there were different characters in the book, so I would read one character's part while another person read the other character's part, and it was quite interesting. But it no doubt enforced our braille reading skills as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And we used to do plays and things in that way where we might get a script for a play and pre-read it, and then people would be assigned different parts to just read it in the classroom. So that was a cool exercise as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can remember commenting on one individual, and so I would be reading ahead of her, and I said, and so my teacher was saying, "Hey, John, you need to keep up with where we are." And I remember saying, but she reads too slow." And
Yeah.
it's just one of those things. It's really okay. I probably should slow down and keep up, but oh goodness gracious, yeah, the things we remember.
Hmm.
But so I was wondering, when were you first introduced to any sort of electronic braille device?
It would have been about 1982 or early 1983, and that was the VersaBraille from TSI, Telesensory. And that was a cassette-based machine. So you would put a cassette in it. The structure of the VersaBraille was that material was organized into chapters and then pages. And so you could get to a table of contents on the cassette and you could navigate through the different chapters, and you choose the chapter that you want, and then the cassette would fast forward to the point that that particular chapter was on the tape, and it would load it, and then you'd be able to scroll through. It was a pretty sure it was a 20 cell display, so it was clunky, and but you could also connect it to an Apple IIe, which I also had, and you could use it for both input and output on an Apple IIe.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's actually progress right there. If you could use it for input and output,
Right.
contracted braille or just
Oh
uncontracted.
gosh, it's testing my memory, but I'm pretty confident it was computer braille that you had to use. I don't think that the computers were sort of smart enough to do the back translation then.
Right, right. Yeah, those were the early days. So the Versa Braille, that's
Yeah.
actually always interested me. So you had these buttons that would navigate the chapter section, I suppose. And then how long was load time?
No, it depends on how much you had on the cassette. I think we used to use C60s, and if you had a lot of data, it might take a wee while for the thing to fast forward to the right place and stop, and it would shudder and clunk, and sometimes you sort of thought the thing was going to rip itself to pieces. And then eventually you would get your Braille. I mean, once the Braille was loaded into the little bit of RAM that it had, scrolling was reasonably efficient. It was actually quite responsive once you had the document loaded, but it just would take a wee while to actually get it loaded in the first place.
Oh yeah, yeah. Wow, wow. Okay, yeah. So basically, it was just waiting for that. Depending on how long the chapter was, it was just really waiting for that cassette to actually get its job done, so that way you could start reading.
Yeah. And the VersaBraille, its intelligence came from a series of what they called overlays, and you could load different overlays into the VersaBraille to make it do different things. There was an audio overlay that you could load that turned the VersaBraille into a tape machine because because it had a cassette drive. You may as well be able to play cassettes on it, and you could also record on the VersaBraille, and it had a little variable speed control. So if you had audio books or things on cassettes, you could listen on the VersaBraille as well.
Oh, that's nifty. Okay, huh? I did not know that.
And then eventually, of course, they went to the VersaBraille 2, and that one had floppy disks instead of cassettes. And it had this kind of new, really weird, spongy, rubbery keyboard that I didn't care for particularly much. But I really liked the original VersaBraille. I liked the keyboard on that, and it was amazing. And because I had sort of developed an affinity for it and seemed to be able to explain it to other people and use it really well, they used me as a bit of a test case here in New Zealand, and I did get to do a lot of my schoolwork on the VersaBraille for a while.
Oh wow, wow, yeah. So you really got to kick the tires and actually test the thing and see what it was capable of then.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice, nice. Yeah. For example, for me, I wasn't introduced to any electronic device or electronic braille device rather until my braille skills were up to par, and I can remember my first electronic braille device being a braille in print.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, those were fascinating. Though I did get in trouble one time. I was told that I had messed up the braille in print, and I had to stand my ground and say, no, I really did not mess up that braille in print. Something happened. It jammed, I guess. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Well, that was cool technology. That was from Quantum, actually, I believe, in Australia, who put that together. And gosh, when did that? I remember using it sometime in the 80s, and I'm sure they've done better variants on it since then. But it was so good because people forget what used to happen was we would have to do a lot of our schoolwork twice because we would braille it out and kind of get it right in our heads, and we could revise it and that kind of thing. But if you were in a mainstream classroom situation and you had a teacher who didn't read Braille, you'd have to turn it into print, and we used to then type it out. And so we were also taught very good typing skills, for which I'm still really grateful. But we used to have to type out our work after we had brailled it and handed it in.
Oh
And
boy.
yeah, it used to be very frustrating when you would type a long, 2 or 3 page homework assignment or something, and then somebody will tell you, "Oh, it didn't come out because the ribbon has run out in the typewriter." So you were doing all that typing for nothing, and of course you couldn't proof your work. You couldn't correct mistakes because you couldn't read anything back on the typewriter. So when the Braille in print came out, that was a pretty significant development because you got instant print just by using the Perkins Brailler that you were going to use anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. So that must have been a really huge relief then, because all you had to do is just braille line, press the square button, and then it would just make the print sound for that line, and off you go. Just remembering, of course, to press the print key every time you brailled a line. But it was quite interesting. I hadn't. It was quite new and fascinating, really. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good old tech.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely. So, what was the first talking Braille device that you were introduced to? For me, it was the Braille and Speak Scholar.
The talking Braille. We didn't really have Braille talking devices very much because in New Zealand, of course, we had Pulse Data, and Pulse Data developed the Keynote, and of course, Keysoft was the software that was on the Keynote. And so in 1986, I got the original Keynote, which was based on an Epson device, and people just did not have Braille and Speaks in this country. They just weren't a thing at all because we were using Keynote stuff. And so I had a computer. It had a little built-in dot matrix printer. So if you wanted to write a note for someone, you would just open a Keysoft file and you would write the note and send it to the little onboard printer and tear it off and stick it to the fridge or whatever. So it was pretty cool. So I think the first device like that I had would have been the Braille Lite 40, and I was the first in New Zealand to get one of those.
Oh wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I can remember seeing a Braille Lite. Oh, it must have been the 20 cell, but I remember seeing the Braille Lite, and I think I must have had the Braille and Speak Scholar, and so when I entered it was going to be the 6th grade. I said to the TC, I said to the teacher consultant, I said, "Is it possible if that I could get a Braille Lite?" And she said, "Well, I have an old Braille and Speak, but what ended up happening was I was introduced to the Braille Note Classic." Is actually what ended up happening for my first actual, well, I suppose you could say, Braille display device.
Right. Yeah, I got my Braille Note after I had a Braille and Speak for a little while, and the Braille Note just took the world by storm. I mean, it was just insane how that thing just took off.
Oh yeah, especially I noticed a huge storm, especially when the M-Power came out. It was like, I had the M-Power, and I would go to friends who had the Braille Note Classic, and they'd say, "Oh wow, you have the M-Power? Can I see it?" And yeah, it was a big wow factor.
Yeah, and it was a fun device to work on. The Braille Note Empower was the project that I managed when I was in charge of blindness products at Pulse Data, and it was fun because they hired me and said, "Look, we know we need to be more competitive. Come on board and develop a new Braille Note." And so with the great engineering team that they had there, we developed the Braille Note Empower. It was a sort of a 7-figure project. I'm still really proud of it because nobody knew it was coming. We announced it, and on the day that we announced it, we were able to say it's shipping now, which is actually quite rare in the tech industry. And we were able to keep the wraps on it. It didn't leak, and it kind of completely took over the blindness conventions in 2005 because nobody was expecting it. So it was great.
Oh yeah. Anything. Anything like that is definitely great when you can just keep things under wraps until you can actually ship it, and then there's no waiting, there's no calling customer service and just bothering them about it because it's ready, it's here, it's ready to be shipped. Things don't happen like that very, very often.
No, well, often what happens is that because it's such a competitive, technology is so competitive no matter what particular sort of niche of technology you're in. And so you are under pressure to reveal what's coming next to kind of give customers some assurance that you're still on the ball and coming up with new things. but we were very fortunate that we were able to just hold the line. It would be harder to do it now too because of social media. I mean, if you want to test a feature, you can sign a non-disclosure agreement, and hopefully people will adhere to them. But a lot of the times people will not, and so if they're sitting on something like, "Wow, I've just seen this amazing new product," and they'll tweet about it or post it on Facebook, and then you've lost your competitive edge.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Most certainly. Yeah. That was just a really fun time. I think when the Empower was released, especially when it was announced on ACB radio is how I think I first heard about it, and quite a it was quite a product that drove people to buy it, and it was great.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
fact,
I mean,
I
I'm
still
very
have
pleased
mine.
with it. Oh, good on you. Does it go?
Um, it does if I plug in the adapter.
Yeah,
So
right. Yeah, the
yeah,
battery's probably seen better days.
right. But yeah, the Braille cells are all functioning, and the great thing about the Mac is that you can still, and you may be able to still do this on the PC, but on the Mac, you can pair it via Bluetooth to the Mac for an external display. So I wanted to try out Braille display mirroring one time, and I did so with the Focus 40 Blue and the Empower, and that worked quite well actually.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is. Oh boy, yeah. So let's go back to high school and college. In high school, were you like me, where your books were provided to you in Braille?
Yes, yes. Uh, Pretty much exclusively, our textbooks were available in Braille. And of course, that meant that they were in enormous numbers of volumes in many cases, particularly the big maths books. You might have a maths text that was in 20 odd or 30 volumes. So they took up a lot of storage. But yeah, they did exist in Braille.
Oh, great. Yeah, I was. Yep. Oh gosh, the volumes. The volumes were very tedious. I can remember sometimes showing up to math class with the wrong volume, and I drove one of my math teachers insane. It doesn't help either when the Braille transcriber mixes the Braille pages of the math assignment up in one volume, and the diagrams are in a completely different volume.
Yeah, um, they're all challenges we face. And thankfully, I mean, I think there's still a place for hard copy math texts because of the linear structure of equations. But generally, we can get a lot of literature-related textbooks, not so much the STEM subjects maybe, but the literature-related textbooks, of course, can be on a device that you can then connect a Braille display to.
Right, right. Yeah, I just remember that math was by far my worst subject in school. But that's past now. Oh man.
Yeah, we can be good at everything.
Yep. No. So let's move on now to college. So were books provided to you in Braille then, or did you have to receive them in electronic format as I currently do?
I didn't have a lot of books in electronic format when I was at university. My university studies as an undergraduate were very reading intensive because I was doing history and political science. And so I would use human readers, and I may well still use human readers. I think we have to be savvy enough to know when a lower tech solution is the best option. And if you can go into a library with somebody and the human eyeball can sort of sift through all of the books that are in the library, or even skim through a book to find out a passage that's relevant to the assignment you're working on, then heck, use the human reader. There's no sense in taking a lot of time to do it so-called independently when doing it independently is going to take you 3, 4, 5 times as long as using a human reader.
Yeah, that is true. Especially for the assignments that are given in college or university. Sometimes the reader it's quite much more faster, really, to just use
Yeah.
a human reader. And the human reader, one good thing about the human reader is that since I don't have my books in Braille, I tend to fall asleep when listening to speech synthesizers, and I don't mean to, but it's just I don't know. It's the human reader. It's more, you're engaging more really with the person. You're interacting more with the person, and then the speech synthesizer, it kind of drones on and on and on, and that's a problem I have.
Yeah, and there's also just the fact that there's human interaction there, which is good. And I'm still in touch all these years ago. I was an undergraduate a long, long time ago now, and I'm still in touch with people who read to me on Facebook and things like that. Who we've stayed in touch over the years.
Oh wow, yeah, that's definitely cool. Yeah, I don't have a reader yet. I've been offered one, but yeah, I may take them up on that. Supposedly, I'm able to get the books in Braille, but then I have to know 6 months ahead of time what they are, and yeah, it's sometimes it'd be nice to have them in Braille, but ultimately, I think sometimes the reader is definitely a better option.
But if the textbooks are available electronically, then presumably you have them in Braille, right? By virtue of the fact that you can connect a Braille display to your device and read them in Braille that way.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's an advantage that I didn't have at the time, and I'm glad it exists now. But if I wanted something, say, to read from cover to cover, then I would have to scan it. And I think when I was at university, what we were using things like the Reading Edge, and I think there was a software version called PC Edge and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, and again, scanning has become so much easier. The Pearl camera is one of the most amazing tools because you can just fold it up and put it in your backpack if you're a student, take it into the library, and snap pages. You can just sit there snapping a whole book if you want, and it's so quick. It doesn't really take that long, and then you can take it away, and you've got the book stored on your device.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, I haven't checked out the Pearl camera. I know that there was a discount on it. I remember hearing about that, and
Yeah.
I do have JAWS 2018, so I may invest in a Pearl because of the fact that JAWS does now have OCR.
Yeah, it's a really nice solution, and again, a very easy way to get transcription from print to Braille. And as long as the print is reasonable, it doesn't have to be perfect even. As long as it's in reasonable shape and you've got adequate lighting, you can really quickly get an entire book if you need to, and certainly even quicker you can get. If you combine Pearl with a human reader, and you get a human reader who sifts through a book for you and says, "This is the chapter that you want." On the topic that you are researching at the moment, and I'm going to mark the beginning of it with a piece of tape or something, and now I'm going to mark the end of it, and you can just snap that chapter into your device so quickly, and then you've got it in Braille.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, yep. I can definitely see where that would be in advantage. But as far as JAWS and stuff like that, right now I'm actually training the disability services at my local college on what to do with, or what to do for the blind, as far as when to upgrade software such as JAWS, and telling them that things need to be brailled. In fact, I had to tell them that their elevator had Braille dots missing on it. The dots had somehow fallen off of it. That was quite
Yeah. Oh,
interesting.
that's yeah, that's good that you're doing that advocacy because we do, I think, part of the skills of being a blind person and just getting on in the world include self-advocacy. And there's a difference between self-advocacy and complaining that just annoys people. So there are techniques you can use to kind of get your way without rubbing people up the wrong way. So self-advocacy is critical, I think.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I have to do. I have to definitely practice that every class that I attend, and you get the, well, I don't know if you can do this part, but then you just have to prove them wrong that no, I can do it. It may be done a different way than what my sighted peers are doing it, but here's how we can do it. For
Yes.
example, like oh, pictures. So I have this raised this raised I don't remember what the board's called, but it's a board, and you can draw on it and you can feel what you're drawing. So in high school, we had to draw a picture of a Greek god. So I drew a picture of the Greek god Zeus. And so I drew with this pen, and it had lubricant in it. And so I was able to draw a picture of Zeus with I was imagining a lightning bolt coming out of his hand, and it was more or less a stick figure. But then any gaps that I felt that were missing, I tried to fill them in. So it was actually quite fun, really, to hand a picture to the
Voiceover muted.
teacher and say, okay, I did it, but I just did it a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually quite fun, actually.
Very good.
Oh, thank you. So let's now talk about the thing that I think really frustrates me the most. That certainly is the fact that there are less than 10%, possibly even lower now, of blind people in the world that read Braille. There's a myth that I'm sure that that you have definitely heard of, that states that all blind people know Braille, and you and I both know that that certainly is not the case.
Yes, it's just a tiny fraction of the blind people in the world. I mean, part of that is because the majority of blind people become blind later in life. So I think it's about 80% of blind people are over the age of 65, and many of those people go blind through conditions such as age-related maculopathy or some other condition. And at that part of their life, many people are coping with different disabilities, and they decide that for them, Braille is not something they want to pursue. Although I would argue that there are there are use cases where just being able to identify the baked beans from the peaches or different things is a useful thing to be able to do. But what is really concerning, I think, is the number of people of working age who don't have access to Braille, and I think that's troubling because the unemployment rates among working age blind people, we keep seeing this statistic of around about 60 to 70% of working age blind people are out of work, and yet the data that is available indicates that well over 90% of Braille readers who want a job have a job. And so when you take Braille into account, the unemployment rate among Braille readers is much closer to the national average than otherwise. And I think that's telling. I don't think it's a coincidence.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah, that's very very unfortunate. I mean, very very unfortunate that that the unemployment rate is definitely as high as it is. You know, it's so basically like what you're saying to clarify is that I'm sorry.
No, I didn't say anything. Go on.
Oh, okay, okay. To clarify, what you're saying is that like the individuals who choose to read Braille, who are of working age, they they're the ones that are getting hired. Is that correct?
That does appear to be the case. Now, of course, what's causation and what's correlate. I mean, it's difficult to be sure, but I think that being a Braille reader definitely helps you in vocational areas. I mean, there aren't many of the jobs that I've done that I could have done without Braille. I could have done some of the jobs I've done without it, but I wouldn't have been as efficient or as accurate. I think of all the work I've done in broadcasting, for example, where I need to read a script that's put in front of me. Now, there are people who can do that with synthetic speech. And on an FS cast, which is Freedom Scientific's podcast that I did a wee while ago now, I interviewed a journalist in Australia who's unable to read Braille because she has a condition that affects the sensitivity of her fingers. And she's taught herself to listen to eloquence reading the news, and she speaks it back, and she has it just at the right pace for her, and she speaks it back fluently, and it's like she really, just listening to her on the radio, it's amazing. And on that podcast, we actually let people hear how it sounds in her headphones, eloquent speaking while she talks it back. And it's kind of like one of those translators that you hear talking when somebody's translating from one language to another. But by and large, I think that Braille opens up a lot of opportunities and independence. And I think the most important thing about Braille for me as an adult is that I was able to read to my children a lot of stories, and that was really important to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I still have a lot of my Braille books that I used to read when I was little, and they're still here on a shelf. And my nephew, I know I will get to enjoy reading a lot of stories to him, and whether he'll be able to sit still long enough, I don't know. But right now he's moving all over the place.
Yeah, that's a good age.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. Oh man, but why do you think that a lot of blind people that are of working age either choose not to learn Braille or uh, or maybe don't want to? Do you think it's a lack of motivation, or do you have a different perspective on this matter?
Well, it's hard to generalize. I think some people have been deprived of the opportunity to learn Braille as a child, and I think that is nothing short of a tragedy. And so when they become adults, I think some people sort of justify how things have panned out for them and say, well, I didn't learn it. I can do without it. It's not that important. Then you get other people where something happens. There's a pivotal moment. And for a lot of people, it's when they become a parent and suddenly they're being asked by their child to read a story, and maybe they have a sighted spouse, and the sighted spouse reads, and they can't read as fluently, and you realize suddenly, man, it's great to be able to know how to use your synthetic speech, and you can depend on it a lot of the time, and there's no harm in that. But Braille is such an important tool in your arsenal because it's true literacy. It's the only way that you can write something down and read back what you've written. It's different from writing something down and have the computer read back what you've written. When you're reading Braille, you are decoding the symbols. Your brain is doing the work, and you're deciphering it. That is what reading and writing truly is. Otherwise, you're listening. And I think some people just feel, well, I've got this far, maybe I don't need to bother. And if you're at home and you're struggling to find work and things like that, then you kind of get into a bit of a trap. So that's why I think it's just absolute. I mean, I applaud the abundance of adult learning programs, particularly for people who may have been blinded by accidents or medical misadventure or any number of things. But we really have to keep fighting to ensure that our blind children get access to Braille. You know, it seems to be a last resort for many. And people kind of have thought in the past, well, if you have a little bit of vision, you can get by with large print. We'll give you a magnifier, we'll give you glasses of that will work. Braille is only for those who truly can't read anything. But I think it's important that we insist that people look at the prognosis. What is somebody's vision likely to be in 20 years' time? And look to the future and err on the side of Braille wherever possible. Now, that said, of course, when you're young, you don't necessarily want to be different from other people. And Braille is different. It's a different form of reading. And so if you have got a little bit of vision then when you're young, you may not want to learn Braille because you think it kind of isolates you from your peers. It makes you stand out. So there are all sorts of psychological issues at play as well.
Right, right. Because you may think, oh well, that associates me. That puts me, that categorizes me as being different. That shows that I'm visually impaired. Let's say, if you've just lost your sight. Oh no, I'm not going to learn Braille. That just shows that I'm blind. It's
Yeah.
it's very frustrating because I was on a I'm not sure what they would. I don't know what they call it in New Zealand, but for me, it's the Euride. It's like a paratransit.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't have that here because we have subsidized taxi travel, so all blind people are entitled to 50% off all their taxis.
Oh, nice. Yeah, you get some money discounted from the service as well, which is really nice. But I was on the Euride paratransit, and I happened to be on a ride with two other blind individuals, and I asked them, "Can you read Braille?" And the response was no. And I thought, how are you getting through college? How are you making it through if you can't read Braille? I mean, synthetic speech, which I'll get to that in a minute, but that can only do so much. It seemed, it was kind of a, not, I mean, I don't know if I'd call it a shocker, but it was really just a really big disappointment. It was like, oh gosh, like, how are you managing this? It was quite interesting.
Well, I think Braille is definitely a tool in the arsenal that I would not want to be without, but I have also seen college professors who are blind who don't know Braille. And it is true to say that with synthetic speech these days, particularly with tools like all of the proofing options that are available in JAWS, where you can hear exactly how things are indented, you can use text analyzer to pick up on incongruities like a bold font that you've turned on but you forgot to turn off, or all sorts of things like that. You can produce a really nice looking document with speech. I think, for me at least, being a Braille user is like being a visual learner. And I find that if I'm really concentrating on something, if I really want something to sink in, then it does sink in more when it's under my fingertips and I'm reading Braille. Because, as you say, it's so difficult for your mind to wander somewhere when you're using synthetic speech. So I certainly don't deny that somebody who's a speech-only user can be very successful. I do think that the ability to really understand the layout of a document, check what it looks like. I so often find myself listening to something with speech, and then I'll just say, okay, at the very end, I'm going to do a read through in Braille, and I find little things that I just didn't pick up with the speech because it's kind of like examining it more minutely. So I definitely wouldn't personally want to be without Braille.
Same here. I find that I'm also an equivalent to a visual learner, because I will, if I listen to something, it sinks in sometimes, but if I really read it, then I can definitely remember it a lot better. And if somebody gives, like, for example, for me even, and this might not be the case, but everywhere, but for me, when someone says a word, like, my mind just automatically thinks about, okay, what would that be like in Braille? And then it's almost like I'm reading a refreshable Braille display in my head, or an embossed Braille book, or an embossed Braille page, and it has that word on there, and it really helps me to correct my spelling, because I think, wait a minute, okay, how does that look in Braille? Oh, okay, whoops, there's supposed to be an N in that word, or something like that. It's...
I think spelling is a really important subject, and these days we have spell checkers in most things. Email clients have spell checkers, and they're everywhere, and there really is no excuse for it. But I do find that we some of us do not take sufficient pride in making sure that what we send out is free of spelling errors. I've received email messages that are just almost indecipherable because the spelling is so bad. And really, there's no excuse now because it's so easy to check your spelling in any number of ways. But of course, if you can write prose without your spelling being so full of errors in the first place, then that's really great. And I think that is a big advantage of Braille, is understanding how words look and understanding how things are spelled. The other thing, too, is that I find that sometimes if you're on, say you're calling a government department or your school or something like that, and you've got information that you need to impart to them, like a tracking number if you've got a parcel that's lost, or maybe they want your account number, any number of things, it can be hard to read information, track it down, process it, look through your records while you're talking to someone on the phone, and also hearing your speech yabbering in your ear, particularly if you're trying to do it all on the iPhone, because what will happen is that when your voiceover starts to speak, by default, the audio of your phone call is going to duck. And so it's hard to hear a caller when you're trying to check some information on your iPhone with speech. So what I often do is have my focus connected to the Braille display. I mute my speech. I use voiceover a lot with speech completely muted. And then when I'm calling up, I'm able to whiz around the Notes app, look things up if I get asked questions, and access the information from Braille. So there's that advantage as well. You're using a different part of your brain to get at information while you're carrying on a conversation with someone.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember a case where I had to read a number off, and I must have had my focus either connected to my iPhone or something of that nature, but I was just able just to read it completely off, read it off without any pausing, and it was just so quick and easy and fast. And you're right, voiceover does interrupt you by kind of distract you rather by ducking, and I also mute my speech on my iPhone, and I also mute the sounds, because the sounds just kind of get in the way, it seems like. So, like, for example, right now, I have my iPhone. The iPhone itself, the mute switch isn't pressed, but the voiceover sound, the voiceover speech, everything is just muted, and it's wonderful just to be able just to browse through. For example, this outline here that I typed up yesterday, and it's so wonderful just to be doing that without speech interrupting you. And the Braille support for iOS 11 is great now. It seems to be.
Yeah, well, it was a bit rough around the edges to begin with, but it is really nice, and I just like being able to reverse my panning buttons. That's something that has made a big difference for me. So, yeah, and that's one of the things that, again, with this daily fiber technology show that we're doing on Mushroom FM, and I'm dealing with a lot of tech news sources every day, and I find something of interest that I think I'd like to tell the listeners about. I send it to Instapaper, and so when I'm on the air, I have my Instapaper open on my iPhone. My focus is switched to using the iPhone, and I can just flick through notes and news stories and everything. It would be a much harder show to do without Braille. So it's just such a useful tool.
It is. It definitely is. And it's kind of interesting that my brain just popped up with this. But I remember one time I was doing a Technology Wizard podcast, and and it was on Zcast, which has gotten a lot better, by the way, as far as audio goes. And I was doing an episode live, and I was talking and of course recording at the same time. But then I just muted my speech, and I was reading to the listeners who'd be listening later. I was reading what people were saying as far as tweets being sent in. So it was really actually quite nice just to be reading something, and so I'd say, oh, and so and so said this, and on we went. It was a quite a nice show, actually.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, yeah, yep, yeah. It no doubt makes your life as a podcast producer a lot easier when you can just have instantaneous Braille. Which
Definitely.
Yeah, most certainly. It seems to me that today's blind children are being introduced to assistive technology, such as, such as the iPad, or such as what have you. Anything with speech, much earlier than they really should be. And that's caused them, I think, to maybe think that they think that because the product talks, that they don't need to learn Braille. And as you and I know, that's definitely not the case. And that Braille is essential for checking spelling errors and grammar mistakes.
Yes, I don't know a lot about what is happening now. I did blog 2 or 3 years ago about my concern with people receiving iPads when the Braille support for Apple was so unorthodox. A lot of those issues have been sorted out now, and I think we have seen the end of the value of the traditional note taker. I think they played a very important part in our technological history, and I'm proud to have played a role in that. But these days, I don't know why we continue with them, really. I think you can go out and you can buy an off-the-shelf device, whether it be a Windows tablet or an iOS tablet. You've got good Braille support. Braille support on Android is still way behind, but on iOS and Windows you have very good Braille support, and you can buy one of these devices at a reasonable cost, upgrade it when it needs to be upgraded while keeping your Braille display, and you're in pretty good shape. In a way, I like the idea of kids getting tablets, because again, it doesn't isolate them, it doesn't ostracize them, and it's not a sort of weird device that nobody understands. Everybody knows what an iPad is and how it works, or even say a Lenovo Yoga tablet running Windows. So I think it's really good. But yes, along with that has to come training in Braille skills. Absolutely critical.
Oh yeah, because I don't think no screen reader, or I don't think that any screen reader of any type will ever fully pick up every grammatical or misspelled mistake. I mean, like, for example, common homonyms like THERE and THEIR, they might pick that up,
Right.
but it just seems a lot easier just to whiz through and correct those yourself via Braille.
Yes, and grammar checkers are trying to help, and sometimes, most of the time, I think they get it right, and sometimes they don't. But there's just nothing that can replace the ability to write something down and read it back. And I mean, even in a sort of a lower text scenario, just being able to write something down on a piece of paper and refer to it is great. And that's not to say that we don't need to use speech-based tools when they work. One of the things that I think is also really exciting going on in parallel with this is technology that happens to be accessible that is mainstream. And so that's why I'm very excited about these smart speakers like the Google Home and Amazon Echo, and maybe to a lesser extent HomePod, which seems to be more of a sort of an audiophile device. But with something like Bixby, I've got a Samsung Galaxy S8 in my arsenal, and I did a series of podcasts on that for the blind side.
You did?
With Bixby, you can actually program Bixby to give a response to a specific question. And so you could use that, for example, if you were given medication and maybe you've got a series of pills you have to take and it's a bit complicated to remember. You can program Bixby to respond to a specific question. You can write the question in like, how much medication do I need to take in the morning? You can program the answer to be, take 3 of the capsules in the round box before breakfast time or whatever. You can actually program those responses. So there are ways around a lot of these things that don't involve Braille, but still I think in an emergency, the power can go off. The fundamental ability to write something down and read what you've written, most sighted people have it, so why shouldn't blind people have the equivalent?
Exactly. Yeah, I definitely agree there. Because like, for example, talking about like the power going off, I have a 6-dot. Have you seen the 6-dot Braille labelers?
I'm sorry, you broke up there. What was the question?
Have you seen those 6-dot Braille labelers?
I've heard of them, but I haven't seen them. We have a Dymo labeler in our house, which is pretty low tech, where you turn the dial. But yes, I think I've heard of those.
Yeah, they're a great device that teachers can also use. But it's a Perkins style keyboard, and it's 6 keys in the space bar, and you can just Braille away. And I think it has a buffer of 150 characters. So you can keep Brailing as fast as you want to, but then it's cool because it's almost like a battery operated refreshable Braille display, and the Braille is so crisp when you cut the label, and it's a wonderful thing to have, actually, especially since it only takes 4 double A's.
Yeah, that sounds very cool.
Yeah. I didn't know if you had heard of that or not.
Yeah, I've not played with one at length, but I've certainly heard of their existence, and it's nice to see a new innovative product popping up in the Braille space that's not super high tech.
Correct. Yeah, most definitely. When I was growing up, I wasn't introduced to JAWS or any screen reader until I was in I want to say middle school. I was introduced to Talking Typer, but I like I stated, I wasn't introduced to any screen reader until middle school, and I might have found that kind of annoying at the time, but now I'm very thankful that it turned out that way. Being in an area that couldn't afford the latest and greatest technology, it really allowed me to practice my Braille skills so that I could become fluent in reading and writing Braille. It's funny, but sometimes I will be talking about computer Braille, for example, and I will have friends that know that obviously know me, but they'll ask, "What is computer Braille?" And I'll say, "You haven't heard of computer Braille?" And then I have to explain what it is. And I learned computer Braille to some degree, thanks to the Braille note telling me that computer Braille is required. And so, this usually comes up though when my friends and I are talking about Android's lack of Braille support.
Yes, we didn't have this issue when I was very young because we didn't have screen readers, but we had the same debate about whether young blind kids should be getting access to talking books or not. And in the library at the School for the Blind, they didn't have them, and their view was, when you get older and you're really proficient with Braille, then by all means, if you want a talking book, get a talking book. But it actually did take some years before I ever got my first talking book machine, and I'm grateful for that as well because I read a lot of Braille and became very fluent.
Oh yeah, yep, yeah. But it is quite interesting though how many people don't know computer Braille, or even what it is. It's
I guess it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. But the fact that Android's Braille support is behind, still, I think it just really makes me go, whoa, what's up with that? Android's poor Braille support is the main reason that I think you and I both don't have an Android phone as our main device, I would say.
No, I've got a number of concerns about Android. I do far prefer the voice assistant screen reader that Samsung has, which is essentially just a different user interface. But the user interface makes all the difference, in my view. I found that I have struggled with getting the angular gestures correct, and I have seen a number of other people have the same struggle. And the Braille issue is really important if you're working with people who have a significant hearing impairment and they rely on their Braille. I also think one of the issues in Android that's of real concern is that Braille isn't sort of baked into Android in the same way that TalkBack in the majority of cases now is. So if you want to get Braille support, if you rely on Braille support, you've got to go ahead and install Braille back. And that is starting to improve. They've got contracted Braille support. If it's not released yet, it soon will be, I think. So it's close if it's not out there. So they're making some progress, but having Braille back as an add-on rather than a core component of the screen reader that ships with every Android device, I don't think that's the best approach.
No, it isn't. And the fact that they're just starting to add contracted Braille input, that's a little... It makes you wonder, and it really makes you, I think, concerned, or it really makes me kind of concerned anyway. It's like, what took so long? It's kind of interesting, actually.
Yeah, I mean, they do have a lot of catching up to do in some areas, and in some areas they are catching up. I mean, there has been some really significant progress with Android of late, and hopefully it will continue. I really want to see multi-touch introduced for devices that are multi-touch capable. And, if they don't want the core gesture set of Android to be multi-touch, that's fine. But I think it would be good if we were given the opportunity to create our own multi-touch gestures if we have a device that supports them. So there are a number of things that just hold me back from Android. Apple has made some decisions that trouble me. The lack of the headphone jack, some of the weird user interface decisions that they've later reversed. But I still find it overall the best mobile experience at the moment.
Oh yeah, most definitely. The fact that iOS has such great Braille support is the reason why I'm definitely sticking with the iPhone. Though some days I say, oh, I'm frustrated about this or that as far as the iPhone goes, but the fact that it does have baked in Braille support is the absolute reason why I'm staying with iOS. And I was very frustrated when I found out about the bugs related to Braille in iOS 11. And luckily I only had to wait about one more day. But I think, so I was on 10.3.3. I kept telling the iPhone, no, I don't want to install iOS 11 because I had already read about the Braille bugs. And what did it do? It installed it on Halloween day. And so I had iOS 11, and that really irritated me for a day. But then all of a sudden, it was iOS 11.2, I think it was. But that's fixed some things, some Braille things. But I was calling Apple about that because I was quite frustrated, as I'm sure you were, because all of a sudden Braille, it seemed, was turned upside down. I just said, if Braille, if these bugs that exist in Braille were to be given to sighted individuals, you would have, and I said this to Apple Accessibility because this is what I was feeling. I said you would have news reports, you would have CNN, you would have ABC, you would have whatever, talking about, iOS 11 has this, iOS 11 has poor whatever, poor typing or writing skills, writing features rather. But yeah, what was your experience like? Were you definitely, I'm sure, frustrated?
I agree. It was a bad look, and unfortunately, this isn't the first time that this has happened, where Apple has come out with a software update that has some very serious bugs, and I think it's a good litmus test. I think we should be asking, would this be acceptable if sighted people had to put up with it? Because Apple has chosen to be an assistive technology company, and we need to hold them to account in the same way that we would hold any assistive technology company to account. And interestingly, I have just been reading, as we record this today, of a meeting that software developers have allegedly recently had with Craig Federighi from Apple, and they have said that they're going to scale way back on the new feature set in iOS 12 because Apple senior executives now acknowledge that iOS is too buggy. It's placing strain on technical support resources. It's damaging their reputation. And so they want to focus iOS 12 a lot more on just getting the thing right, getting it to work the way that we expect it to work. And I certainly hope that accessibility gets a good chunk of those resources in terms of tidying things up.
As do I. Oh man, I can remember iOS 8. Ooh.
Yeah.
That still makes me cringe. Actually, that was not a good time. But
No,
it definitely wasn't. But I think that Apple really committed themselves to an assistive technology company, to being one rather. First, of course, in 2009 when the 3GS came out, but then more so when you had Braille support in iOS 4, and that definitely, when they started adding all those Braille displays, it's like, okay, yeah, you are definitely an assistive technology company now. Right. And then they added switch control and Bluetooth hearing aid support and all that stuff, and that's like, okay, yeah, you are most certainly an assistive technology company. But
I'm really sorry.
Jonathan, it was great having you on the podcast, and thank you very much for coming on and having a chat with us about the discussion that I think certainly needed to happen.
It's my pleasure. Really glad to do it.
Thanks again.
There we go. So that was the conversation I had with Jonathan Mosen about Braille. Does anybody have any questions regarding Braille displays or anything like that? I know next week we'll be talking about the Focus Braille display in general, but does anybody have any questions? Okay. Hold on.
Voiceover unmuted. Full Zoom meeting recording.
Okay. I'm gonna stop the computer sound sharing now. There we go. Well, if there are no questions. I do appreciate you guys coming, and hopefully you guys learned something new. But oh yeah, Steven, do you have a question?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I want to share a compliment or things that I didn't even know about this thing, about the interview. You know, I didn't know you fell asleep to speech synthesizers.
Yes. I have a Kindle Fire, and one of the things that I had to listen to was a whole college book using Ivona Joey. And if you guys have heard Ivona Joey, sure, it's a great voice for navigating the Kindle, but it's not a good voice for reading with the Kindle. That I fell asleep to that. I fell asleep to Siri. The Siri. Maybe it's. Yeah, I think it was not the new and improved, but the older male Siri voice. Definitely fell asleep to that. Yeah, the only one I can stay awake to though is Eloquence. That's the interesting thing.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely. Anybody else have any? Oh yeah.
Yeah, Sean, I have a question. Obviously, that podcast was recorded, I don't know when, but it's not current. So,
Right.
As far as Mushroom FM is concerned, do you know what the name of that current technology show is, and perhaps when it is aired?
Right. So that wasn't that certainly wasn't a current podcast, but it definitely had to do with Braille. So that's why I chose that one. I think he stopped doing the Daily Fiber. I think it's now strictly the Mushroom FM show. I believe it. So I haven't listened to his podcast in a while, I must admit. I think it's still Sundays at 2, something like that. I'm not sure exactly. But if you look up...
It's on Saturdays at 2 Eastern, and it's it's Mosen at Large.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
It's held live. He's 3 hours long live, and he condenses it after that into a weekly podcast. Sometimes he might have a special extra, like this past week with the Apple event. They had another panel discussion about the new iPhones and such. So that's an addition. But yeah, he's on every week, every Saturday, 2 Eastern, 2 to 5 Eastern. It's Mosen at Large.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'd forgotten.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining this week's presentation. Like I said, next week we'll be talking about the Focus 40 Blue Braille display with using it with an iPhone. And until then, I will talk to you guys later, and thanks for listening.